Have you ever done something that felt like a great idea? You had a plan, you took action, and it just did not work? When I was 15 years old, I met a girl on a family camping trip. We were camping at the beach. And now, if you heard my story in episode 1, you know that this was not a regular occurrence for me. This was a big deal. She wasn't from my town. She didn't know me. She didn't know I was poor. When you're camping, everyone's poor. She didn't know my story. We had a great few days, talking, laughing, just getting to know each other. And when the trip ended, we exchanged phone numbers, which at the time felt like a major win. So I got home, and because I have at least a little bit of game, I didn't call right away. I waited a day. But I also knew I needed a plan because I was not naturally smooth. I know that sounds crazy. But I wasn't. I am now, obviously. So for those of you who didn't grow up in the 80s, let me introduce you to one of the greatest artists of all time, LL Cool J. He had this song, I Need Love. And I thought, this is it. This is my move. So I picked up the phone, which, by the way, was attached to the wall with a cord, and you had to dial, and somebody had to be at a phone on a wall on the other side to actually answer it. So I called, and her mom answered. I asked for her. She gets on the phone, and the moment she says hello, I don't ease into conversation. I don't build rapport. I go straight into the song. When I'm alone in my room, sometimes I stare at the wall, and in the back of my mind, I hear my conscience call, telling me I need a girl who's as sweet as a dove. For the first time in my life, I see I need love. Now, I'm not going to sing the whole song for you. I could, but I'm not going to. But for her, I did. I sang the entire song, every verse, every chorus, every word, complete with sound effects, keyboard sounds, I was in it, all of it. I committed, fully in. And when I finished, there was no one on the line. She didn't hang up. I'm pretty sure it was technical difficulties. Phones in the 80s are unreliable. I'm certain she did not hang up. But I never heard from her again. I had a plan, I took action, and the result was not what I hoped. If you've ever felt like that, then this episode's for you. Welcome to Faith in the Friction, a podcast about finding strength, resilience, and hope in difficult places. I'm Sean Smith here in the T.W. Lewis Studio 42, and today we're talking about something that every one of us has experienced. You did the right thing, you took the step, you acted in faith, and it just didn't work. Or at least it didn't work the way you thought it would. And this is where things get hard. Because most of us expect that if we do the right thing, we'll see the right result. If I step out, it should work. If I obey, it should produce something. If I try, it should pay off. And when it doesn't, we start asking questions. What was the point? Did I do something wrong? Should I have done that in the first place? And here's the truth. We don't mind hard. We don't mind pointless. We can endure difficulty if we believe it's doing something. But when it feels like nothing's happening, that's when discouragement sets in. That's when we start pulling back. That's when we stop taking steps. This is why I love the story in Luke chapter 5. You have these experienced fishermen. They know what they're doing. They've been working all night long, doing the right thing, putting in the effort, and catching nothing. No results, no payoffs, just empty nets. And then Jesus shows up, and he tells them, go back out, try again. And I love Peter's response because his response is honest. He basically says, we've already tried that, been there, done that, have the empty nets to prove it. But then he says something powerful. Because you say so, I will. Notice this. Obedience is not always immediately rewarded. Let's look a little bit more into this story. Luke tells us that they had been fishing all night long and caught nothing. Now, this matters because these weren't beginners. These were experienced fishermen. They knew the water. They knew the timing. They knew the patterns. This is what they did for a living, and they did everything right. They went at the right time. They used the right methods. They put in the work, and still nothing, just empty nets. And here's what's important. Their lack of results was not because of a lack of effort. And sometimes that's where we get discouraged because we assume if I'm doing the right things, I should see something. But Luke 5 reminds us you can do the right thing and still have an empty net. Faithfulness is not proven by immediate outcomes. And if we're not careful, we start tying our obedience to results. If this works, I'll keep going. If this produces something, I stay committed. But that's not obedience. That's negotiation. Obedience says, I will do what is right, even when I don't see results. Because if your obedience depends on visible success, you'll eventually walk away. And listen, God often works after the empty nets. Let's keep going through this story. After a full night of nothing, Jesus tells them, go back out. And think about how this would have felt. They're tired. They're frustrated. They're just done. And now they're being asked to try again. Not a new strategy, not a better plan. Same nets, same boats, same water, same effort. And this is where the tension builds because the request doesn't make sense. And this is where many of us stop because we've already tried, we've already put in the effort, we've already come up empty. But here's what Luke 5 shows us. The breakthrough didn't come before the empty net. It came after it, after the frustration, after the disappointment, after the exhaustion. And that reframes everything. Because what we often label as failure, God may be using as formation. The empty season is not wasted. It's shaping something in you. Trust doesn't depend on outcomes. Endurance that doesn't collapse under pressure. Faith that holds, even when nothing seems to be happening. And some of you are in that kind of season right now. You're tired. You've tried. You've come up empty. And the question is, will you trust God enough to step out again? You see, we've got to trust the voice, not the outcome. And this is where it all comes together. Peter says, because you say so, I will. Not because it makes sense, not because it worked last time, not because it felt confident, but because Jesus said so. Because you say so, I will. This is one of the most powerful statements of faith in the Scripture. Because Peter isn't speaking from confidence. He's speaking from tension. Everything in his experience says this is not going to work. Everything in his exhaustion says, I'm done. Everything in his logic says, we already tried this. And yet, he moves. Not because it makes sense, not because the outcome is guaranteed, but because of who said it. That's the shift. You don't obey because it works. You obey because he said it. This reminds me of a moment several years back. My wife came across this promotion. Disney was doing a give a day, get a day deal. You do some community service, you get a free ticket to Disneyland. Sounds like a great deal. I'm in. Now, I assumed this meant something like we're going to pull weeds, pick up trash, something simple. But my wife had a different vision. She signed our family up to entertain at a nursing home. Now, We're not an entertaining family. I mean, I can juggle, but not at a level where people are paying to see it done. And based on my earlier story, you know where my singing career has gone. But there we were, standing in front of a group of seniors about to put on a show. And I remember thinking, this is not going to go well. I was there. I didn't want to be there, but I was there. I didn't think it would work, but I went. I went not because I believed in the outcome, not because I thought it would be great, not even because of the Disneyland ticket that was coming. I went because she asked me to. And sometimes that's what obedience looks like. You take the step, not because you're confident in the result, but because you trust the voice. And for many of us, this is where the struggle really is. We trust outcomes more than we trust God. We want assurance. We want clarity. We want results before we move. But faith says, I will move based on who God is, not based on what I can see. And when Peter obeys, that's when everything changes. The nets fill up, the boats overflow, the momentum spills over, and everything breaks open. But it didn't happen at the point of understanding. It happened at the point of obedience. I've had seasons in my life where this was incredibly real. 10 years ago, I was in a high-level leadership role in a church, preaching regularly, leading teams, fully invested, and then everything started to shift. Our lead pastor became terminally ill. Over 3 years, we walked through that with him. As a leader, as a team, as a friend, and then he passed away. And just a few weeks later, I was let go. I lost my job, my church, my community, my mentor. And I remember thinking, what's happening? I've been faithful. I've shown up. I've done the work. And it felt like everything was falling apart. But I kept going, not because it made sense, not because I could see where it was leading, but because I believed God was still working, even when I couldn't see it. And over time, step by step, that season led me to where I am now, in a role that I love, doing work that is meaningful, serving in a way that feels deeply aligned with how God has shaped me. But I couldn't see that then. All I could see was the empty net. If you're in a season right now where it feels like it's just not working, you're doing the right things, but not seeing results. You're showing up, but not seeing change. You're trying, but not seeing progress. You're not alone, and you're not wasting your faithfulness. Just because it hasn't worked yet doesn't mean it won't work. And just because you can't see it doesn't mean nothing is happening. Some of the most important things God does in your life happen beneath the surface. So keep going. Keep showing up. Keep taking the step, because the net is not empty forever. You don't obey because it works. You obey because he said it. And in time, you'll see why it all mattered. Thanks for listening to Faith in the Friction. If this has encouraged you or inspired you in some way, please share it with someone who might need that encouragement today. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.